You'll only wind up ripping the cover, and I don't like that. And stay out of here.
Wait. You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
On last week's episode, we discussed Tony Scott's directorial debut, The Hunger. The stylish and artistic David Bowie, Catherine Deneuve, Susan Sarandon helmed vampire love triangle film released in 1983. We now move on to probably the best-known vampire movie of the 80s, Joel Schumacher's 1987 horror comedy, The Lost Boys.
Initiation's over, Michael. It's time to join the club.
Of course, named after the Lost Boys of Peter Pan. The Lost Boys follows a group of teenage vampires living in Santa Carla, a barely disguised Santa Cruz, who never grow up and never age as long as they keep feeding.
Now you know what you are. You'll never grow old, Michael. And you'll never die. But you must feed.
The parallel to The Hunger is, of course, striking, with the notion of aging and youth at the center of the film. However, unlike The Hunger, whose promise of everlasting youth is snatched away from the half-vampires when they suddenly age, the vampires of the Lost Boys are able to just keep running around, making Santa Carla the murder capital of the country. The other parallel to The Hunger is that in order to turn into a vampire, the unwitting convert must drink from a vampire's blood, whereas vampires consume human blood in order to feed. The Lost Boys has an incredible ensemble cast grabbed from 80s pop culture. Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patric, Alex Winter, Jamie Gertz, Diane Wiest, Bernard Hughes is the grandfather, and Edward Herrmann, whose voice has narrated like half the audiobooks I've listened to recently. Michael Emerson, played by Jason Patric, and his little brother Sammy, played by Corey Haim, move with their mom and dog Nanook to Santa Carla after their parents divorced to live with their eccentric hippie grandfather. Although it looks like a fun place to grow up, with cool beaches and a boardwalk seemingly close to the house, they're informed that Santa Carla is the murder capital of the country.
Wait a second, let me get this straight. Are you telling me that we moved to the murder capital of the world? Are you serious, Grandpa?
Well, now let me put it this way. If all the corpses buried around here was to stand up all at once, we'd have one hell of a population problem.
It soon becomes apparent that the reason isn't gang violence or 80s-style crack addiction, but that this is a town with a roving gang of vampires who need to feast on human blood. Besides that, it seems like a lovely city, though. After meeting a cute girl named Star, played by Jamie Gertz, who won't stop staring at him, Michael is unknowingly brought deep into the epicenter of the city's vampire problem, and turned by David, played charismatically by Kiefer Sutherland, into a half-vampire, needing only to feast on human blood to finally turn.
You a pirate, man.
That would explain everything.
A loose, dark, vampiric take on Peter Pan, but obviously evil Peter Pan, the original screenplay was actually written by first-time screenwriters. James Jeremias, a grip who had been making a living in Hollywood, read Anne Rice's interview with the vampire and had an idea. One of Anne Rice's vampires was a 200-year-old vampire stuck in a 12-year-old girl's body. James Jeremias thought about one of his favorite stories, J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, and thought, what if Peter Pan had been a vampire? He never grew up, he could fly, and he only came out at night. James and his childhood friend Janice Fisher wrote their screenplay, The Lost Boys, around that premise. And, in February 1985, the rights were purchased for $400,000. Originally, Richard Donner, who would shortly go on to direct Shane Black's first screenplay, Lethal Weapon, was slated to direct. The screenplay had also been inspired by Richard Donner's successful last film, The Goonies, but the screenplay just wasn't working for him. Even after Jeffrey Boehm, a staff writer for Warner Brothers, touched up and reworked the screenplay. Eventually, Richard Donner left the project to direct Lethal Weapon, but stayed on as a producer. Hewler-Donner, the production partnership Donner had with his wife, kept searching for a director. They'd also produced St. Elmo's Fire, which is where they met Joel Schumacher. After a bunch of convincing, Schumacher realized what wasn't working. The screenplay had all the characters as young kids. It was a children's script. Schumacher decided they should all be teenagers, and he decided to add some sex to the mix. He also made it a black comedy. The mix of sexuality and comedy and style would fill the hole that Richard Donner had felt. Sex courses through The Lost Boys, not just Michael's attraction to the half-vampire Star, but as has been continually pointed out, his queer-coded attraction to Kiefer Sutherland's David, who literally tries to turn him. Joel Schumacher's attachment to Jason Patric as the lead, and Jason Patric's extreme reluctance to be in the movie, led to Schumacher giving Jason Patric and the entire cast an unprecedented amount of creative input. including allowing Jason to cast his former Solar Babies co-star Jamie Gertz as Star. Besides Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patric, Jamie Gertz, and Corey Feldman, who had been in The Goonies, Gremlins, and Stand By Me at this point, Joel Schumacher chose to largely cast unknown young actors for the teenage parts.
But it was more that I spent a lot of time with Joel because he tried to get me in the movie for a long time. And once we started going, because I had a lot to do, it was always about the piece, whoever else was in it. So if I felt that there was an issue that it wasn't quite working, it was more going to Jamie or going to Kiefer and say, what do you feel about this or this? I would never speak for them. And then I would take the lead and go in there and say, look, and I got to say, look, Lost Boys is Lost Boys because of Joel. Now, I'm not, and when I say that, I mean, he got the guy who shot Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, Michael Chapman. That guy doesn't come off that and shoot teen vampire movies, but Joel got him. He got Bo Welch, who was an amazing production designer. And then he got all these actors. He get Diane Wiest right off an Oscar, Ed Herman, Bernard Hughes, and young guys like me and Kiefer. Which
in turn led Warner Brothers to slash $2 million off the film's budget. That $2 million was going to be used for prosthetics and special effects, which led Schumacher to cut down drastically and save most of that money for the finale. It also meant, for effect, that Joel Schumacher would have to break a promise to Jason Patric and make him wear vampire makeup in the finale, something he had promised he wouldn't have to do, trying desperately to get him on board. Some of the more interesting things that had to be done for budgeting, many of the flying sequences are actually unused offcuts from Top Gun. The vampire crew going around the house was done by grips running around outside of the house with giant lights. Most of the film was shot in Santa Cruz, but officials made them change it to Santa Carla so as not to be called the murder capital of America. They couldn't restrict the public during shooting and had to shoot the Tim Capello Saxman sequence over and over again as fans kept rushing the stage. The Lost Boys was finished on a budget of $8.5 million and would go on to make $32 million at the box office.
One thing about living in Santa Carla I never could stomach. All the damn vampires.